Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how to use Python, and I'm also going to teach you. First of all, let's print hello world using the print function. Basically the print function takes arguments, and I'm actually going to explain everything here. So the print is the function name, and a function is basically like something that simplifies another something, like how computers simplify calculation and stuff. So function is basically that. So basically print is the function name. Functions are things that simplify tasks, otherwise you would have to write binary to do this. The parentheses is where the arguments go. Arguments are basically like things that you give to functions. Like a mouse is technically a function that simplifies moving the cursor, and when you left click you are basically giving the mouse a argument of the left click. So arguments are basically like that. And this is a string. A string is basically text in programming languages, and a string goes inside these quotes, or it can also go in single quotes, but I just prefer double quotes because they are more standard. Probably most of the languages use them, so I just prefer them. So when we run this, it's gonna print hello. Look, it printed hello world. Now we're gonna start using variables. Variables are basically things to store data, like how a shoe cabinet stores shoes, and there are many different types of variables. I'm gonna show you. So first variable type is float. You don't actually have to put these here because this whole thing is optional, because Python automatically detects which type of variable it is, but I'm just putting it to show. So basically float is the variable for like floating point numbers, decimals like 3.14. Integer is the integer is the type for normal numbers like 23 and stuff. And str is obviously strings, as I showed just now. And there are also lists which can be of any type. Like if I make a list, I can this is the list definer. These are square brackets, so I can put anything in here. I can also put variables in here. We separate the items by this, and the list can contain any type of items, whether it's float, int, string, or whatever. You can also print these with the text, and I'm going to show you. Basically when you're printing, don't just quickly add the string, add an f then the string. This makes it so you can place the values of these variables between the strings, like string is, and you can do s. Put these in these brackets, like these curly brackets. Yeah, curly brackets is not parentheses. And so basically now it will show strings. String is strings. Look at, so string is strings. And I'm not gonna go too much into it, but you can also use name, I think, to print the variable name. And it didn't work. I think it works, but let's just ignore that because we are just starting. And this thing can also accept any type. Like I can just put float in here and it will still work. And look, we run it, and it says 3.14. Now math in Python is basically just normal math. Like for example, if I take an int, I'm not going to add that now because Python automatically detects the type, as I said. So if I take an int, basically math is reverse in Python. In actual math, you first add the expression, then the value, but in Python you obviously first add the value holder, which is basically a variable, then the expression, which is 2 plus 2. Now let's print this. If you only want to print some value and not a string with it, you can just print it like this instead of a string, which means it will just print the variable value. Look at prints 4 because obviously 2 plus 2 is 4. We can also inline these. Inlining is basically taking complex tasks and putting them into one line, one very long line actually. So I can obviously just do 2 plus 2 directly and it will print 4. I can also use variables in these, like for example, if I make a variable before I, which I'll set to true, 3, and if I increment, add 2 to that variable, it will work. It won't show something like error or something. And this actually looks like normal math, like that's a math variable with the value 3, and then this increases and stuff. So it will show 5 now because 2 plus 3 is 5. And we can still also fully simplify this but just by adding 2 plus 3 here. So that is math. But I want to show you some things obviously. And there are something different. First of all, this is the multiply symbol. It's not X, it's the asterisk or star. And this is the divide symbol. It's not the symbol that isn't on my keyboard. It's the slash, the forward slash, not the backslash but the forward slash. So that divides. And you can also obviously use parentheses, like 2 plus 2 divided by 3, which is a, and look, it shows that. I don't recommend using float numbers that much because, like, look at this. This is a floating point number. Does that look readable to you? There are like 57 billion threes, so I don't recommend using floating point numbers that much. You can also convert variables. For example, if I take a variable a, which is 3.14, and I want to turn it into 3, I won't just hard code everything. I'll actually make a variable. It's not necessary, as I said, you can just directly do it too. But what I'll do is do int. Int is a class which is an object which is a type. So we are going to do int and call it like a function. Even though it is not a function, we are just going to call it like one and pass a to it. So basically what this will do is convert a into an integer. Let's print b so to see if it works. Look, it turned into 3. We can also use the float type to turn it back into a floating point number, but this time it won't be 3.14 because obviously Python doesn't know what comes in the decimal this time, so it's just 3.0. and this applies to every single type. Like I can even convert this to string using the string type like this, and look, it shows the same result, but this time it is actually a string, and the reason it shows the same result is obviously because Python does not print the quotes, so it just shows the same result even though it is now a string. And for some reason my cats are fighting. What the fuck? What do you... Now let's get to the actual good part, which is conditions. Obviously, if you are making an actual app, you want to do some task based on a condition. So I'm just going to show you how it is done using obviously if. But before this, I'm going to show you the operators. First of all, we have AND, which is basically 2 or more conditions that are only true if all of them are true. So basically, if I take A and like 2 plus 2 equal to 2, basically equal to is the equal operator. It checks if two things are like identical, I mean equal. So if you just type equal, then it won't work, but if you type equal to, then it will work. And you can also check if they are not equal using the not equal operator. First, let's actually print this to see the value. Look, it says true. So we can also check to see if it is not equal using the not equal operator, obviously. And we can also check if it is less than 2, which is false, obviously, because they are the same. Greater than 2 will also be false because they are the same. But you can also combine equal to and this using the greater than equal to and less than equal to operator. Like if I do less than equal to, it will show true because it checks if the value, I mean if this value is less than or equal to this value. So it will show true, as I said. But now let's try using AND, which is AND true if 2 is less than equal to that. Now now I don't know why I did that. This is a chain operation. I am not gonna actually go deep into it because obviously it's just PyCharm trying to complete things for me. So we are gonna make two functions now, I mean two conditions. 2 less than equal to 2, which is true, but 2 less than equal to 1 is not true. So all of this will be false because AND makes it so all of the so it is true only if all the conditions are true. Basically, I'm actually gonna show you using Paint so you understand it better. So for example, we are gonna make a big thingy. So this is, oh, my cat is playing with my, what do you want, bro? Just go away. Why did I sit in my cat's room? So basically, if this is 1 and the other value is also 1, actually, then I mean 1 and 1 are just true and true. In programming, 1 is true and 0 is false, but in Python they are just identified as true and false for better readability. So if both are true, meaning they are 1 and 1, then the output will be 1, which is true. But if one of them is false, like for example is 1 is 0 but the second one is not 0, then the output will be 0. And if the other one is also 0 but this one is not 0, then the output will still be 0. But if both are 0, then the output will still be 0. And we are also going to use the OR operator now. So the OR operator is like self-explanatory. It basically checks if one of the many conditions is true and then returns true. So if any of these conditions is true, it will say true. But if both conditions are true, it will still say true. But if all the conditions are false, then it will say false. And there is also the NOT operator, which basically reverses a condition. I mean, by that it just reverses whatever the value is. So basically, if a condition returns true, then NOT will turn it into false. If it returns false, then NOT will turn it into true. So you can do NOT, which will turn true into false, and also this is false, so that means it will show false. Look, it showed false, but if I don't use NOT to reverse the condition, then it will show true. Now that we know about all of these, let's actually use if and else. So if 2 is less than 4, then we'll print 2 is less than 4. And yeah, whatever you want to do in the function will go after this colon, and it should be one tab after, because if you don't add another tab, Python will just give you an error, because it doesn't know what code should be executed in the if statement and what out of the if statement. So we will need to add tabs, and this actually nests. Like if I add another condition in this, then I'll have to add another tab, and as I add more conditions, I'll have to add more and more and more and more tabs. This actually applies to most things in Python, like classes for types, functions, and if statements, loops, and probably all things. Then 2 is less than 4. Else is also self-explanatory. It only executes when all the conditions above are false, and it also ends the if else chain. Then you can start a new one, and a if else chain is basically just an area of if else. So if it is not true, then 2 is not less than 4. This code is unreachable. Now don't worry about that. PyCharm is just saying that because obviously in no universe can 4 be less than 2. So it says that this code is unreachable. Now if we run this, it will say 2 is less than 4, which is this one. But if we do like greater, then it won't. 2 is not less than 4. I mean, it shows that because because obviously we didn't change the message. Now even though you can also add more if statements, don't just add them like this, because otherwise if both conditions are true, it will execute both of them. That is probably not you want in many cases. But you can use elif, which is a if statement that only executes if the statement above it is false. So if this is false, then this will execute. Now elif 2 is less than 4, then we will print the same thing, and look, it says 2 is less than 4 because it checked if 2 is greater than 4, but it wasn't greater than 4, so it continued. But then it checked if 2 is not greater than 4, then is it less than 4, and that is true, so it just printed that and stopped the chain here. And if both conditions were false, then obviously it would just go into the else area. That is conditions done. Now don't worry about like adding if statements in if statements. You can obviously do that. You can add as many as you want, and you can also add else in else, but I'm just going to show you some things that are not valid, which one of them is starting a if statement with a elif, and that is actually a very very easy to understand error, because obviously there is no statement above, and if there is, it is probably a else statement, so Python will not know which statement is false or not. And the second is like using a else without a elif or without a if, because obviously else needs at least one condition to see if it is false, then execute. Now for today's video, that is noted obviously, I'm just gonna show you how to use loops, then we are gonna end the video. The first loop is the probably easiest loop, for I in range 10. This makes it so it is executed 10 times, we can print I, which is the counter. So it will print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 7, 8, 9. And the reason it's doing that is basically range converts 10 into a list from 0 to 9, and the reason it's 0 to 9 is because lists in Python start with 0. So Python developers just made it so the range function doesn't do 1 to 10, it does like 0 to 9. That is actually better. Now you can do this, I think, and oh yeah, it didn't work about. So you can obviously just make it so it prints it incremented by 1, which makes it more readable because it's now 1 to 10. Now the other type of loop is while loop, and it is also very readable. Basically it executes while a condition is true. For example, if I have a variable I which is set to 0 and I make a while loop that only runs while I is less than 10, then it will run indefinitely until I is less than 10 or equal to 10. So we can print I here. Actually we can just set it to 1, so it prints 1 to 10. And after that, obviously if you are using a loop like this where you use I, make sure to increment it by 1 or whatever you want, otherwise the loop will just run indefinitely. By indefinitely I mean it will run until the end of time. So now it prints 1 to 10 just like that. And that is today's lesson complete.